Blockchain, the technology that underpins cryptocurrencies, has the potential to change our lives. Today, we hear from three trailblazers in expanding the application of blockchain beyond currency. In discussion with Alex Heath of Cheddar, please welcome to the stage Executive Director of Hyperledger, Brian Behlendorf, the co-founder of Tradeshift, Gert Sylvest, and the founder and CSO of NYIAX, Carolina Abenante.
Packed house, all right. So the goal of this talk is going to be to, I guess, demystify the blockchain a little bit and talk about why and where it's actually useful. To start, I'd love for each of you to briefly summarize what your companies are doing in the space, just for everyone.
Well, I'm the founder of NYIAX, and NYIAX is partnered with the NASDAQ. And what we did was we took their financial trading engine and adapted it for another asset class, which is advertising. So we created a future marketplace for advertising, and our use of the blockchain is within the contract for reconciliation and distribution of funds.
Gert?
Yeah, so I'm co-founder of a company called Tradeshift. We started in 2010. We are a company, a network that connects the financial supply chains of companies. So we have 1.5 million companies in the network, and they exchange everything from digital catalogs to purchase orders to invoices in 150 different countries today.
Brian?
So I lead Hyperledger, which is a part of the Linux Foundation. The Linux Foundation has been around for about 16 years. Hyperledger's been around for about 3. And what we do is build...
We might need to fix your mic. Sorry, 1 second.
Does this work now? Testing 1, 2. Testing?
No.
Nope, not yet. Okay. Maybe we'll get a microphone. Wait.
There you are.
Okay,
all right,
good.
there we go.
Thank you. So Hyperledger is part of the Linux Foundation, about a 16-year-old nonprofit that's operated at the heart of the open source communities around initially just the Linux operating system, and now in cloud computing, software-defined networking, and now for the last 3 years in blockchain technology. And so Hyperledger is a consortium of organizations and developers building open source tools to go and build your own blockchains.
Great. I should mention also, we'd love to have some audience questions. So in your Web Summit app, if you go to the left, to the profile section, there's a place called Slido to put in questions. We'll try to take some of those towards the end of the talk if people submit those. So first, I just kind of want to take a step back and look at the state of blockchain. I mean, I feel like for a while we've been saying blockchain is going to disrupt X. It's going to change everything. It's going to do this. What I really want to understand is it actually useful yet for all these things that we think it's going to change, or is it an education problem? Is it an actual use problem, or is it just people? Obviously, there's a lot of people interested. So what is keeping it from actually changing all these industries, or is it? And I guess, Carolina, we can start with you.
I think it's actually changing certain industries. I mean, I'm business to business, so I deal with advertisers, agencies, and publishers. And they had a huge transparency issue because the contract area was completely broken. They had no idea how they were spending on digital, how they were spending on video on demand. And blockchain allows every party to know their counterparty and actually follow the contract as it populates and as it reconciles. This is something new, and it allows for a significant reduction in costs for compliance. We've seen between 35 to as much as 72% on average, harmonized 48% reduction in compliance costs and auditing costs to both sides.
Okay, advertising, there's one.
No, I think there's a few different areas. I guess first of all, the traditional financing space, so how you actually finance and start up a company. We're already seeing some different models spring up. So here with, I think it's 14 billion alone in 2018 flowing into the blockchain space. It shows some new models for how to raise money. But I think I'm also in business to business, so seeing the kinds of investments that are flowing towards trade financing and challenging the models that exist in this space, I think it's a very, very interesting development. So I think all the areas where you see that typically people operate in silos, that you have many different participants and financial instruments, but they're not really interoperable. That's a really interesting space. One of the reasons I think we haven't seen a huge adoption yet is like with everything in the making, people are scratching their heads and finding out what can this alien technology do. And I think what a lot of large companies are now coming to realize is that the challenge is really with the economic models that you have to work within, which is typically challenging the, let's say, centralized models of operation that many of these companies are used to work in. So what happens when you actually start to need to share value in your supply chains? It means you have to think a lot of things differently compared to what you do today.
Yeah, and for our part, we're seeing this year a number of networks that have been in pilot, that have been in proof of concept, actually going into production. We're tracking about 50 of these different networks, tracing everything from diamonds to rice to leafy green vegetables, and a lot of other supply chain scenarios being used, not only to provide traceability and try to keep blood diamonds out of circulation, that sort of thing, but to then be used as the foundation for KYC processes, for trade finance processes, those sorts of things. Seeing other use in other financial settings as well, but the ones that I think really get me intrigued are in the digital identity space, and that's where there are a couple of production networks now in British Columbia, work being done in the Philippines, and about to be launched in Sierra Leone. But I think we have an answer here for how do we get to portable digital identities without requiring a big server at the center or a way for a government to deny you your citizenship in a really interesting way.
So we truly own our identity and take it with us. That's the idea, right? Or like the idea of like a decentralized way of storing and saving medical records, I feel like is another example, right? Where you can take it with you. It's not in a hospital necessarily.
Yeah, well, I mean, blockchains don't give us this for free, but it's filled in a missing piece that the digital identity community online have been kind of working towards for a long time, which is how do you get something that has the ubiquity and the portability of, say, log in with Facebook, log in with Twitter, but doesn't park all of your data at the other end of a name and password on a remote server, and instead takes kind of an inverted model where all the data that's interesting and that really attests to who you are and what you do is held close to you in a wallet. You don't store that data in a blockchain, but what you do store in the blockchain are public keys, hashes, timestamps, and other means to be able to prove the verifiability and the integrity of these kinds of documents. So here's my diploma, right? I give it directly from me to you, but it references data in the blockchain so that you can verify that it actually claims the right things.
Okay. I don't want us to get into like talking about the price of these digital crypto whatever assets really that much, but I do want to understand from your all's perspective as kind of early movers in this blockchain world, how the price affects the work you do, or does it not? Because I think a lot of the attention in the space is driven by the price, especially we saw last year. So, and does it change how you operate when the price fluctuates or when it doesn't? I mean, or not? Maybe.
Well, we're not doing a tokenization. We're using an enterprise blockchain. We work with Chain, which is Stellar. We were lucky enough with NASDAQ not to have to ever pay for this. So there was no cost. We're non-volume dependent. We can place as much as possible on as we need, and we were lucky for this piece. And we're not using a tokenization at this point in time, although there is a sense of tokenization in any of the chains. So there hasn't been any issue with price for us.
Yeah, I think to some extent it's a little bit the noise overpowering the signal. So again, also coming from the business-to-business space, I think a lot of the volatility and the price fluctuations we've seen this tend to discourage people in a business-to-business context, thinking, how can I conduct my day-to-day business if crypto as such looks so volatile, and I think that's clearly a deterrent to some. But I think it kind of misses the point because essentially what is the key is what blockchain enables you to do. So imagine a future where basically your payments between two companies doesn't need to be intermediated by a third-party inefficient infrastructures, and imagine a future where you can take those money owed between companies and make them liquid and plug in finance as one. This is something that's very hard to do in the existing infrastructure. So I actually do think the question about volatility, the question of identity, is some of the things that are holding businesses back from entering this space full on. I think one of the trends, like $500 million of investment in the stablecoin space alone in 2018, points to a growing interest in how can businesses actually penetrate this space in a well-understood regulatory context where you still get KYC and AML and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of change will actually happen in 2019.
I think we're moving beyond a world where people thought that there'd be one blockchain or the blockchain, right? It doesn't look like the internet. It looks like the way the world kind of works, which is a lot of different communities, a lot of different use cases, a lot of different cultures and regulatory environments, where there'll be some that'll be very public, and those will include many of the public cryptocurrencies we know of today. They might include new competitors, such as the David Chaum's Elixir system that we just heard about, right? Or Stellar, or other types of ways of doing settlement. There might even be other kind of global identity networks, but most of the transactions that we know about that'll happen on blockchains will happen across lots of different kind of bespoke kind of consortia ledgers out there. Again, some of those public, some of those simply very large. Where joining those networks will be very easy. It's the, sign a end user license agreement as a business and you'll get a certificate to participate. Others will be a lot more confidential, and that's just kind of this tapestry that we'll figure out how to weave together and do discovery against and join and that sort of thing. And in that context, then, the value of a particular token kind of matters less than the value of the underlying systems and software and the networks that get built.
I like this audience question for each of you. What are your favorite examples of a blockchain idea where blockchain has no business being used? Something about a tea company doing something in blockchain, I remember, that comes to mind. It might have been like Long Island iced tea or something.
Long Island blockchain iced tea.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
But that wasn't a blockchain. We were all following that when that came out. I mean, that was just a joke. They just it was Long Island iced tea.
But the stock went way up.
It did. They put blockchain next to Long Island iced tea, and it went up like a rocket ship because anything blockchain would go up because no one understood what blockchain was.
Right.
And what would be the utility inside the space. But that's not the worst of the ones that came out last year, and not the worst of it. I mean, there was quite a few that were out there. But the utility of blockchain, from my stance, is you have to know your industry and where it will work. If you don't know where it's going to work in your industry and how the ecosystem is going to work with the blockchain, then that is not conducive to just slap blockchain on anything.
Yeah, so I think what is holding a lot of companies back, and I think you can understand that is to say, what I'm used to doing in my business today, that is, I'm actually being audited on what I'm doing. I have to keep my book of records. I have the unit of account. And today, there's no clear regulatory framework that allows you to deal with settlements, with financing, and so on, between two companies on the blockchain in a clear way. But I think these barriers are very rapidly being overcome. And what you have seen is basically 200 plus exchanges springing up. So when you look at blockchain, as an ecosystem where people come up with new models for exchanging value, that is clearly working, and the investment is growing, and the kind of ideas and solutions you see out there is clearly growing. But there's a regulatory barrier that is holding businesses today back from actually taking that leap and say, we'll exchange our receivables, we'll deal with our debt, our financing, our insurance in these kind of infrastructures, because there's been a waiting game on finding the right regulatory blueprints to put that into it. But I think some very interesting things are happening these days.
I think Banana Coin was my favorite kind of just small little joke. There was a much bigger joke that was perhaps less funny, which was the Petro, the Venezuelan attempt at an ICO that we should all have been kind of wary about. I don't even know if it's actually been registered on a chain so much as was hyped. It was an attempt, I think, to plan that hype, and now I'm probably on a dictator death list somewhere just for calling it out. But on the flip side, the idea of central banks issuing digital currencies on a blockchain is something that we will see. There are many of them investigating that now, where it'll be a government's promise to redeem a token on a blockchain network of some sort for a similar, dollar or euro or real, Iranian real or renminbi into the bank account of your choice. And that's going to, I think, really make a lot of the stuff that's being pioneered by the cryptocurrency space in terms of the programmability of money and the portability across borders at very low cost, really compelling, but get us out of some of the fluctuations and the uncertainty about what's at the bedrock of how these systems work.
Which entrenched incumbent companies, or maybe kinds of companies, do you all think is the most vulnerable to blockchain?
Well, anybody would say the banking system is an entrenched company that would be very vulnerable to blockchain, but they can work with blockchain. And many people are going to start saying also financial exchanges are very vulnerable to blockchain. But these all live in regulatory environments, so when people start saying banking is going to be disrupted, exchanges are going to be disrupted, they don't understand the legal and regulatory back end and how important it is to actually exist. Blockchain will help them. It'll be a tool for them. It will enhance them, but it will not completely disrupt them.
Yeah, I think I second that. If I look at the area of trade finance, it's a good mix of institutional and private players. And a lot of these tools work in silos now, and they basically make their margins out of lack of transparency because there's so little digitization between companies. And I think that's rapidly changing. And I think I agree, a lot of the innovation will happen in collaboration with some of those players, but I think it has the potential to, turn the, let's say, the ranking of some of these companies and the power balance up and down, because some of these, both banks and on the private side, have been very late into the game, and I think they are up for an awakening in 2019, and have basically been investing too late in this space.
20 years ago, people asked what companies are most threatened by open source software, right? And a year ago, when Microsoft joined the Linux Foundation, there was an internal email thread going around going, are we done here? Can we go home? And really the interesting thing is how much organizations picked up open source software, incorporated into what they did, and even companies that have been around for 100 years have figured out how to do new things with it. But at the same token, I don't think we would have had Google or Amazon today if not for a lot of the open source software out there. And I think that'll be the story in 20 years when you look back at who are the biggest companies that arose by then.
All right, I think we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you guys so much. Thanks, everyone.